Well, g'day and welcome to Lyle Live. It's great to have your company. I want to talk about a few things that have been on my mind to do with politics and the culture. If you want to join the conversation, feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to respond to as many of those as I can. But I want to talk about the culture wars. I want to talk about Malcolm Turnbull, Israel Folau, and why we're not including the issue of pornography in this debate about rape culture and the things that have been going on in Canberra that have been widely reported on. So there's just a few issues there. Just want to cover very briefly. So thanks again for your company and giving of your time to be with me as we have this discussion. I was triggered a little bit this morning by a comment that I read in the Australian newspaper, and it was by Father Frank Brennan, who's a Jesuit priest, a prominent lawyer, public intellectual in this country. I've had the privilege of meeting him. He's a lovely, charming man. I don't agree with him on everything, but he has written a book about the trial of Cardinal George Pell and about how he was unjustly convicted and then acquitted. And in the course of writing about this, and that's a whole other issue which I won't go into today, but he says that he is someone who's been a critic of George Pell, hasn't always seen eye to eye with him, and particularly didn't see eye to eye with him in terms of what Brennan called Pell's culture wars, his culture wars. Now, when I see people downplaying the culture wars, it bothers me because if what is happening in terms of the trashing of the human rights of the unborn and the harming of their mothers is not part of some sort of a war. I mean, let's take, for example, obviously that issue of the sanctity of human life, but then the abortion enthusiasts who have gone and decriminalised abortion in so many of our states in recent years haven't even allowed provisions to stop sex selection abortions, to stop couples wanting to kill a baby girl because the unborn baby is a girl and not a boy. This happens, sadly, in some ethnic communities. They refuse to put in anti-coercion provisions so that football stars, and there's been many examples of this, can continue to coerce their girlfriends to have abortions. If this is not part of a culture war with real victims, then how else would you describe what's going on? So this bothered me. I've written about this on my blog at lyleshelton.com.au. You can go there. The article is called Triggering Shots in the Culture Wars, and it bothers me. And in that article, I've referenced a lecture that's on YouTube, and I've linked to it in the article at lyleshelton.com.au. It's a lecture given this week by Dr. Stephen Shavora, who is a friend, and he looks at this issue of what he calls the great awakening and woke culture. But he said some disturbing things in that lecture which feeds into this narrative that there is a culture war. And he says that with what's happening with woke culture and its integration into various laws, particularly anti-discrimination laws, so-called equality acts and the like, that we will see Christians go to prison in our lifetime. Parents, principals of Christian schools, pastors even, because they hold to a Christian view of gender and sexuality, marriage, or whatever. So these are serious things, and when you put all this together, you can't tell me there's no culture war or downplay it. Sorry, Frank, as much as I respect you. Now, so I'd commend that article to you on my blog, lyleshelton.com.au, Triggering Shots in the Culture Wars. The next thing I want to talk about is Malcolm Turnbull. We've all seen overnight Malcolm Turnbull sacked as from his position as Net Zero Emissions and Clean Economy Board Chairman for the New South Wales Government. Now, Matt Keane, the New South Wales Environment Minister, is someone who is hell-bent on closing down coal-fired power stations in New South Wales. He wants to close them all. He doesn't want baseload power to be replaced by gas-fired power stations, which is Scott Morrison and the federal government's preferred option. He thinks somehow that solar and wind can do the job. Now, that's great if it can, but I don't know anywhere in the world where a modern industrialised economy that has manufacturing and jobs is being run on wind and solar. It just isn't happening. And of course, battery technology is a long way from being able to power and store the necessary energy to run a modern industrialised economy. So you've got Matt Keane there He appoints Malcolm Turnbull as his Net Zero Emissions and Clean Energy Economy Board Chairman. And of course, Malcolm Turnbull comes out and says what Matt Kean already believes and what the policy of the Berejiklian government in New South Wales is, and that is to go to net zero. But because Malcolm says it in the context of the Hunter Valley, which contains the world's biggest coal export port at Newcastle, and lots of coal jobs, thousands and thousands of them in that regional area, and there happens to be a by-election for a seat vacated by a disgraced National Party MP who was using prostitutes and allegedly abusing a prostitute. That's triggered a by-election. And of course, the people in that electorate care about the coal industry and their jobs. And of course, Malcolm's coming along and saying, well, you've all got to get into wine growing and horse breeding if you want to keep living in the Hunter Valley. Now, that sparked a revolt amongst Matt Kean's colleagues, and Matt Kean was forced into a humiliating back down to sack Malcolm Turnbull. He lasted 8 days in the job. But the question is, why did this happen in the first place? All Malcolm was doing was being honest about his beliefs on climate change and the need to deindustrialise, to decarbonise the economy. That doesn't say how we can keep an industrial economy going. But of course, it's sensitive. And Malcolm Turnbull's made the fall guy, even though all he is doing is implementing what Matt Kean wants. And again, I've written about this in a bit more detail at lyleshelton.com.au. I'd commend that article to you. But the point of that article is, until all politicians pushing this agenda come clean, it's only going to be the honest ones like Malcolm Turnbull who fall foul and lose their positions. Because if people like Matt Kean and the New South Wales government were honest with the voters, they would all lose their jobs, not just Malcolm Turnbull. Israel Folau, well, he's in the news again, and it's great to see some comments coming in. Thanks, David. I'll just go to his comment there, and I'll see if I can share that on the screen so you can all see. The Prime Minister is missing in this whole culture war, is not interested in fighting for righteousness. Obviously, David is someone of the Christian faith. He has stated he is not interested in fighting culture wars. Most Christian believers oppose the growth of cultural agenda. Culture wars are anti-Christ, anti-church, anti-Christian. Wake up, Prime Minister, stand up for something. That's a pretty strong comment. Thank you, David, for sharing that. Look, I think we do need to see greater engagement, not just from the Prime Minister, but from all Australian parliamentarians on these so-called culture war issues, because they do go to the heart of freedom. They go to the heart of what sort of nation we're going to be. And certainly there is one side that's fighting the culture wars, but our side, it seems, is still trying to work out whether or not there is a culture war. And that's as it applies to issues of freedom of speech, human rights for the unborn, religious freedom, and it comes down to these issues of economic prosperity, because this issue of whether we need to decarbonise and deindustrialise our economy for the sake of carbon dioxide emissions is also part of these culture wars. So let's go to Israel Folau. This is a man who, according to Senator Matt Canavan, has broken no law. We've got players in the National Rugby League who have been involved in domestic violence against women, very topical at the moment, yet there are many players who have committed domestic violence and they have been forgiven and allowed back into rugby league. You've got players who have been convicted of drink driving, they're back in it. Israel Folau quotes the Bible, talks about heaven and hell in regard to a number of identity groups, but because one particular identity group has taken offence and they seem to have cultural ascendancy, Israel Folau is banned from playing rugby union, rugby league in this nation. It's just outrageous. It's crazy. And I've posted on my Facebook post a link to a 7 News article. But disturbingly in that, you've got commentary from LGBT activists saying that Israel Folau supposedly hasn't been sorry for what he said in terms of quoting the Bible, therefore he shouldn't be allowed to play. Well, if that's the approach you're going to take, then maybe you should ban the Bible altogether. I mean, we get into banning books, burning books. This has been done in the past. It doesn't end well, yet that's the implication of what is being said here. Um, Thank you, Eden Crawford in New Zealand. Thank you. Much love there. I'll show that on the screen. Very special fellow. Shout out over there. Hopefully the travel bubble means that we can see each other. Good to have fans in New Zealand and international viewers. You should be at work, Eden. Now, that's Israel Folau, and I'm sure Eden would be one who'd be keen to see him back on the pitch. Why aren't we including pornography in this discussion about toxic rape culture and all the shenanigans at Parliament House? That's a really, really good question. And that's answered in a fantastic article on the Spectator website today by Andrew Vincent. I don't know who Andrew Vincent is. He's a terrific writer. I've been tweeting about this over the last few months as well. And people like the Collective Shout organisation, many feminist groups have also been saying this, and yet we are trying to solve this issue of the toxicity towards women and the objectification of them without looking at the elephant in the iPhone, and that is this issue of pornography. And until we address that, I don't think we've got a hope of addressing rape culture. And this is the cognitive dissonance of our nation. We've had 50 or 60 years of the sexual revolution where we've said anything goes. We've legalised pornography. It's now available to 8-year-olds on their iPhones. And now we're wondering why women like Brittany Higgins are taken advantage of by predatory males, and why so many Australian women can identify with and have experiences of being sexually abused or dealt with inappropriately by males. And I think this is a problem that we need to own as a society, and we need to take a good hard look in the mirror. So these are really important issues. So that's just a few issues that I wanted to talk about today. I've got lots more content at lyleshelton.com.au. I'd encourage you to go there. You can also follow me on Facebook. I've got a public Facebook page. Some of you are watching this on Facebook Live, and I post all sorts of interesting articles because I think it's really important that we engage with these issues. I think our freedom is at stake. I don't think we can keep going the way we're going as a society. I don't think we can continue to ignore the sort of issues that myself and others are regularly posting about. So you can follow me on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter at Lyle Shelton. I'm on Gab, which is a new social media platform put out from America, and it's an alternative. It's one which will allow freedom of speech, and I'm there as an insurance policy because I do worry that at some stage I might be kicked off Twitter and Facebook. I've already had Facebook posts censored, so you can find me on Gab, also at Lyle Shelton. But I'm going to remain on Twitter because I want to keep engaging with those who have different opinions and allow them to be exposed to my ideas. I don't want to just exist in an echo chamber. David Connor, again, God bless. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Appreciate you watching. Well, look, that's all for Lyle Live today. Thanks so much for your company. And please continue to visit my website, lyleshelton.com.au. Don't forget my book, which is also available at lyleshelton.com.au. It's called I Kid You Not, Notes from 20 Years in the Trenches of the Culture Wars. It's been selling extremely well. We're just about to hit 4,000 copies and go into a fourth print run. And I'm very excited about that. And thanks to the good people at Connor Court Publishing for helping me out with that. One more comment before I go. Brothers and sisters, I and the kids at our orphanage in Uganda, we're kneeling down kindly requesting some help and prayers for food. We have spent days without food. That's really tragic. I didn't know that we had people in Uganda watching. I'm not sure I can pronounce your name properly, Ain Marvin, but thank you for watching. Look, our hearts go out to you, and look, let's do what we can. Let's obviously pray, and let's do what we can to support those who are needy. I certainly have a friend, Tommy, in the Philippines who lives in a dump in the Philippines and helps kids who are starving there, has a feeding program. There's so much need in our world, whether it's Uganda or the Philippines. So thank you for that comment. There's lots of needs as well as these culture war issues in our own nation. It's very important we don't become overwhelmed by this, that we're sobered by it, but we aren't overwhelmed. Okay, well, that's it for today. Thanks so much for joining me. God bless, and until next time, all the best.